And we have a lot of great news coming up, including a discussion about everybody's favorite open source operating system that we'll get to in just a bit. But first, we have some sad news for people who are a fan of small desktop systems, because this week Intel announced that they are no longer going to be selling their wildly popular next unit of compute, or NUC, small form factor machines. This comes on the heels of Intel selling their server business to MyTac, which you may remember that we covered on the rundown back in April. The NUC has been a very popular platform for home labs, as well as production environments with large numbers of remote branches, such as chain restaurants. Per an email sent to Intel partners, they claim that they are going to be relying on third-party manufacturers such as ASRock to continue to make the smaller boards for those machines, but they won't be doing it themselves in the future. Now, Stephen, you saw the writing on the wall here. Is this more of Pat's cost-cutting measures?
Well, yeah. Um, yeah, and we did see the writing on the wall, to be honest. I think most people in the industry might have seen the writing on the wall here with the decision, as we mentioned back in April, to wind down the server business and hand it over to MyTac. Just like the server business, the NUC was an example of Intel basically building a client device out of their core assets. And just like the server business, the NUC served as a sort of a goal, a golden example of what you could do with Intel technologies. On the server side, they used it as a way to develop and proof all sorts of server technologies, also to prototype and basically push them out to the market. And they did the same with the NUC. You'll remember that these came with alongside the Ultrabooks back in the sort of early 2010s, when Intel was fighting back against Apple's use of their low voltage, low powered CPUs in things like the MacBook Air and the Mac Mini. Intel saw that there was an opportunity to bring that technology to the PC side of the market. But it's interesting, a funny thing happened on the way to the PC side of the market, because a lot of people took one look at these little boys and they said, that doesn't look as much like a desktop to me as it does a brilliant little server. So a lot of people, including yours truly, went out and bought these suckers and used them for things like VMware vSphere hosts clusters. We basically, many of us had labs full of these things. One of the popular hacks to it that I did was to install a second Ethernet port using the mini PCIe port on the motherboard. People did all sorts of things like that to basically press these into use as servers. Well, at the same time as that, there were companies out there that said, if we need a lot of compute power, we should just take these bare NUC motherboards and gang them up and build clusters of them. And so that happened. Ended up buying 30 of these suckers from a company, a hyperscaler, that stopped using them and now have all the NUCs I can eat. These things are incredible little devices. And over time, Intel has moved the NUC from being what was essentially a Mac Mini clone to being a real force in the industry. We saw gaming NUCs, we saw high performance NUCs, we saw new form factors. We saw all sorts of remarkable innovation coming out of Intel around these client CPUs and client devices. And they were taken up all over the place. And one of the big areas that they were taken up was at the edge, as we've discussed at Edge Field Day, on our Utilizing Edge podcast, and with our Utilizing Edge podcast co-host, Mr. Brian Chambers. He's talked quite a lot about how his restaurant, Chick-fil-A, his employer, uses these things. They use clusters of Intel NUCs in their stores as a high availability application platform at the edge. These things are everywhere at the edge. In fact, we were making jokes at Edge Field Day that we should have just called it NUC Field Day, because everybody was talking about them. And now, well, they're not quite gone, but Intel's walking back from it. According to a statement from Intel, they've decided to stop direct investment in the business unit and to pivot their strategy to enabling ecosystem partners. In other words, Intel's pretty much done with this, and they're hoping that some of the other companies that are manufacturing these devices, some of them you've heard of, like HPE and Dell, and Lenovo, others that you may not be as familiar with, but are selling tons and tons of them. They're hoping that they will kind of pick up the baton and keep running with this small form factor device. I hope they do too. But I think that this really sells short one of the reasons that we all love the Intel NUC. Essentially, the best thing about this device was not so much the form factor and the price. Now, those were great. But the thing that a lot of us loved about this device is that it was so well designed, well made, and well supported. Intel didn't cheap out on these things. They shipped with the good Ethernet controllers. They shipped with the good storage devices. They shipped with good power and cooling, and they were well supported as well. You can still download drivers and BIOS updates and everything in a very well organized, easy to access, easy to use site. You can still update them. They're not loaded with weird junk. They're not loaded with peripherals you don't need. Essentially, they're everything you need and want in a little PC. And that's the thing that I'm going to miss the most. Frankly, that's what a lot of us miss about Intel motherboards. That's what a lot of us miss about the Intel server platform as well. These things were not weird corner cases. They were not filled with bloat. They were not trying to nickel and dime you. They were basically just good, well designed, well supported systems that you could use for years and years. And that is why people were so excited about the NUC. And it is a sad day. I decided to wear a black shirt in mourning today because, as you heard, the NUC is at an end.